Ooh, this is a fun one. So we've got a question here to wrap things up from 81NC19. That's great. So to help me with the name recognition, if you could just make it a very easy alphanumeric code, that would be extremely helpful moving forward. So even on Facebook, go ahead and change your Facebook name, make it an alphanumeric code like that. So the question is, what exercises are overrated and should be eliminated? Part 2 of the question, which exercises are underrated and need more attention?
Overrated exercises. Oh, I'm going to start with a spicy one. If you're not a powerlifter, I think bench press is overrated. I think that the freedom of movement that you can get from dumbbells is probably a better option. The biggest drawback to dumbbells is it's probably not a great idea to go for a 1 rep max dumbbell press, but unless you're a powerlifter, you don't necessarily need to know your 1 rep maxes in the first place. But yeah, it's like dumbbell bench is a lot more joint friendly for a lot of people because you can do it with a quasi neutral grip, which I have found helps a lot of people who have either elbow or shoulder issues. Like I said, you have more freedom over the range of motion. For most people, the dumbbell press movement of your hands just feels more natural than your hands being locked in a given position, like X distance from your shoulders for the entire press. And you can also just pretty easily get a longer range of motion if you want. For a lot of people, that doesn't matter, but especially for people with relatively big chests, a bench press is like a partial range of motion exercise, which is perfectly fine if you're a power lifter, and minimizing range of motion helps you be good at your sport. But if you're just training for general strength and muscle development, it's probably not a great thing. So yeah, I think that, and I'm certainly not saying bench press is a bad exercise, but the fact that it is like the exercise that most people in the gym care about, I think that, again, it's not bad, but I would say it is substantially overrated.
Would it be controversial to suggest that like essentially all calf training is overrated?
That's very controversial, and I'll fight you over that. Calf training is the best.
Why do you say? When's the last time you trained calves?
2 days ago.
Really?
Hell yeah, I love calf training.
Dude, I've taken months off of calf training, and I have not seen it. This is probably saying more about me than calf training, but I have not seen any change in my calf size from like 6 months of detraining.
Well, I mean, if we think about muscle hypertrophy versus maintenance, we know that it takes way less stimulus to maintain adaptations than to accrue them in the first place. And since you walk around day to day, I mean, your calves are probably getting adequate stimulus to maintain whatever muscle you built. So I don't think not losing calf size is evidence of calf training being worthless. I think that just shows that walking around day to day is an adequate level of stimulus to maintain whatever you built.
Okay, so build up some calf mass, and then it's useless. Then just walk around all day. That's my modified hot take.
Sure, but calf training is so fun.
It's not fun, dude.
It feels great. Are you kidding me?
Dude, I have an E version ankle sprain from my wrestling days my ankle is still just a mess from it. Your ankle fell off.
Yeah.
How are you doing that?
I mean, like,
you can't even move your ankle. How are you doing calf training?
Loading up a bunch of weight is the only way that ankle can go into dorsiflexion, and so I have really fucked up ankles for anyone listening. And I think the reason I like calf training so much is it's the only way that I can stretch my calves and ankles out to make them feel good. My body weight is insufficient to cause my body, or to cause my calves to go into dorsiflexion. So getting on something like a leg press and loading up like 400 or 500 pounds gives me enough force to actually go into dorsiflexion and stretch my calves out, man, it feels good.
And just for context, I mean, your foot fell off. You had a basketball injury.
Yeah.
It just everything broke and tore. A bystander vomited from seeing it, correct?
Yeah, I had a compound tib-fib fracture, and when I stood up, my foot was pointed the wrong direction. So, yeah, my left ankle's pretty worthless at this point.
I will say, for a less hot take of overrated exercises, I've gotten away from doing the barbell military press, and I've moved more toward unilateral dumbbell pressing overhead, almost like a circus dumbbell press.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that it might be because I have one shoulder that's great and one that's terrible, but the unilateral approach to me feels so much more natural. I'm standing not against a back pad, so the scapula and the glenohumeral joint can kind of move with their natural synchronicity between them. I've got a lot of my clients switching over from the traditional military press to single arm overhead pressing. How do you feel about that?
No, I can see that. That makes a lot of sense.
And a lot of people that aren't really into overhead pressing really struggle with clearing the chin and then kind of getting back under the bar on the military press.
Yeah.
Any underrated exercises so that we're not just completely bashing things and being negative all day?
I think single leg RDLs are great.
I was gonna say that.
God damn it. Okay, how about you expand?
But no, I have a different one.
Oh man, I was gonna say you can expand on that, and I'll come up with another one. I think single leg RDLs are great. I think they the vast majority of the people who I have had try out single leg RDLs who come from any sort of strength sports background, and primarily here I'm thinking mostly powerlifting and a few weightlifters. So our sports are very bilateral. Like squatting is a bilateral exercise, deadlifting is a bilateral exercise. There's some level of asymmetry if you do like a split jerk, but for the most part, cleans, snatches, bilateral exercise. And I think that a lot of people wind up with like the hip extensors on one leg being considerably stronger than the other, and the range of motion in their hips differing a pretty fair amount. And here I'm thinking like adduction and internal rotation range of motion. And so a lot of times when people try single leg RDLs for the first time, they'll notice that the movement feels pretty easy on one leg. They can, whatever implement they're lifting, they can take it all the way down to the floor without much of an issue. Control is good. They get onto the other leg, and just balancing on that leg feels fine. But then once they get into, I don't know, maybe 40 degrees of hip flexion, then it just all starts falling apart. And the range of motion is way worse. The control is way worse. Strength through like the upper part of the range of motion is pretty good, but once they start getting into deeper hip flexion, one hip is way weaker than the other. And so I think single leg RDLs, one, are a good exercise to like equally strengthen your hip extensors on both sides. I think that you get a good training effect from it. And I think it's a good exercise for shining a magnifying glass on strength imbalances you may have. To be clear, I'm not saying that in a context of, if you're, 3% asymmetrical, you're going to get injured. Because I think that's how a lot of people think about asymmetries. I only worry about asymmetry insofar as if you have a major strength deficit or a major movement deficit on one side of your body, that could be negatively affecting your performance. So I'm thinking about this purely from a performance perspective, not like a injury perspective. But yeah, I think that both as an exercise for actually training your hip extensors and as kind of a diagnostic tool, single leg RDLs are absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I've been doing a ton of those lately. I've been doing with a dumbbell or a kettlebell. I haven't gotten into the barbell too much with those, but that'll be down the road once I get a little more comfort with it. My underrated exercise is for the physique-oriented folks out there. When you think of lat development, everybody's doing a million kinds of rows, a million kinds of pull downs and pull ups. The straight arm pull down, I think, is a very underrated exercise for lat development. And if you're fortunate enough, there's the old school hammer strength pullover machine.
Oh, hell yeah.
That is only found in like the dungeon gyms, and then just like you'll bump into it randomly and you'll be like, how did this get here? But that machine is so clutch. It should be mandatory in all commercial gyms. So clutch for lat development. Absolutely love it. It is an ungodly lat pump that cannot be replicated.
No, I agree. I don't think I've ever used the original machine, but I've used that type of machine in one of the gyms that I used to train at maybe 5 years ago had that machine. And yeah, like I do very little direct lat training, but that machine just felt so good.
Oh.
I still found a way to use it like 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.